Hi everyone, welcome to today's webinar, Beyond Job Titles, the Transformative Power of Sustainability Education. So in today's webinar, we will be exploring the benefits of a sustainability education compared to traditional role-specific training. We'll delve into the transferable skills and competencies defined by UNESCO, highlighting how a sustainability-focused curriculum equips individuals with the versatility to thrive in diverse roles. The session will address common concerns about the perceived lack of context-specific content in sustainability education, demonstrating how these competencies are invaluable across various industries. We'll also discuss why employers are increasingly seeking candidates with a sustainability background, emphasizing the competitive edge they bring to the workplace. So without further ado, let's get started. Let me begin by introducing our speakers. Dr. Paul Wright is an environmental scientist with over 25 years experience teaching in UK higher education. Starting out studying deep sea marine sediments, he moved to postdoctoral position at the National Oceanographic Centre. He moved to the precursor of Solent University to teach both marine and terrestrial environmental science, developing much of his work in lab, field, and workshop contexts, preferring to focus upon developing students' hard and soft skills within the context of more realistic work scenarios. And we have Dr. Mary Hale. She's an academic and tutor at MLA College on the Global Sustainability Development Portfolio. Marie was recently awarded the Senior Fellowship of the Higher Education Academy. As a human geographer, Marie's research interest focuses on people and their relationships to place across a range of contexts, specifically in protected areas and the interweaving of social and ecological landscapes. Careers in sustainability, what a career in sustainability means and what does it look like. Sustainability degrees, what do you get out of a sustainability degree? And sustainability trends or developments that our speakers are excited about. So over to Dr. Paul Wright. Paul, does sustainability have a sector?
Well, I think you started with probably one of the tougher questions, because the answer to the question, I think, is probably no, and also yes. I think it's difficult to find people who very often directly go from a sustainability degree into a sustainability job, but I think that's getting more common as time goes by. Many people enter into the world of sustainability through organisations because of their previous roles they've held in maybe health and safety management, operations, occasionally even environmental management. I think the point is that people approach a sustainability job from all kinds of different types of angles. Some come straight out of relevant training, even more seem to inherit a role, and perhaps some need to learn on the job to a degree. And then I think there are others that find it as part of their leadership and management portfolio. I think that often throws people the fact that there's no real sector to go into, unlike, say, medicine or engineering or law. But the point is that sustainability and sustainable development touches our lives in so many different ways that most, if not all, organisations need people who understand what it means and how to promote it. I think that's true if you work in the built environment, maritime, waste and water management, fashion, young people services, government, the list goes on. I think that means that for us as educators, we have to be ready to cope with working across a wide range of different levels and a wide range of different contexts. So there may be people who want to get into the sector, whatever that means to them. Some of those might not even have a great deal of higher education experience. So we need to have a solution for that. There are others that have the basics, but they want to upskill and they want to take their sustainability career further. And we have to have a way to help them too. And then finally, there are people with lots and lots of experience and management and leadership skills. And we want to find a way of accrediting that high level work. But we don't want to remove them from the workplace because they're doing some fantastic work there. So we need a way of trying to blend those two worlds together. And I think that's basically what I was trying to do when we started to develop the sustainability portfolio at MLA College.
Thank you, Paul. That was quite interesting. Another question for you. Why are employers increasingly seeking candidates with a sustainability background?
Okay. Well, I think that's because sustainability is a really broad church. It's not just about, let's say, what we do with waste, whether that's in a manufacturing process or in the context of what we do in a normal day to day office. It's also about how the organisation conducts itself as a business, its approach to its staff, and its approach to the community in which it trades in. It's also about the people who work within that business, their health and well-being, how they treat each other, and sometimes it sounds much, and it is much more than just how we deal with the natural. Now, sometimes I think that all sounds pretty much like common sense, and I assume that everybody understands it. However, I think we can all agree that individuals, organisations, communities, even nations, well, we tend to forget, perhaps, or we choose to ignore what our responsibilities to each other are. And I think people are confused as well from time to time. But I think that from a business perspective, the need to be seen to be trying to do something is pretty paramount. And sometimes that may even be legally required. And then you start getting into a murky world of measurement and monitoring and reporting. And I think that's where the real expertise of a sustainability practitioner starts to kick in.
Yeah, I would agree with you, Paul, on that. I think people with a sustainability background can be really helpful for corporation and businesses, especially in the context where they need to provide more information about their sustainability implications. And we find that employers are more and more keen to hire people with a sustainability background, and especially people who are able to understand reporting systems, how to analyze and use data, but also who have an understanding of the environmental and social governance landscape. So we find that more and more people are empowered to be part of the change and solutions to sustainability issues, and often in life-changing ways, as you were just mentioning. So that's where I really agree with you. Sustainability touches our everyday lives and is intersecting with so many aspects of our societies, especially if we are trying to build inclusive, healthy, and resilient societies for all. And by all, I mean us as human beings, but also with other species with whom we share the planet.
Thank you, Paul and Marie. That's very insightful again. I have a question for Marie now. What does a career in sustainability mean? What does a sustainability job market look like, and are there any jobs in it?
Oh, that's what is a career in sustainability? So that's almost as challenging as defining sustainability itself. Okay, let's break it down. I would say that one of the common points of a career in sustainability is that often it involves different disciplines, but the goal you will find is similar. So it comes with an interest and a care for our planet and the impacts that our human societies have on it. Um, so if we scaffold it a bit, there are different pathways which can help to structure the extensive field that sustainability is. So let's start by looking at businesses. So business positions in sustainability is usually about improving social and environmental impact for operating a financially viable organization, might that be for profit or non-profit. And these business positions can be those with a focus on sustainability or those who are really trying to just minimize their impact. So that's business from the start. And then we can look at policies. And I think when you combine policy and sustainability, it's about how can you make better rules? How can you make efforts to change laws and regulations on behalf of the environment and broader socio-environmental issues? So people who are looking to do a career in sustainability policy can work for a wide range of governments, local governments, businesses, non-profit, or outside the system as well. And then the third kind of sector that I can identify is the education sector. And I guess Paul and I fall into that one, where educators are trying to change the mind of others by communicating scientific and different dimensions of sustainability and what are the challenges associated with it. So those who are looking into a role in sustainable education can again aim for a wide range of positions, and not only lecturers, but also researchers, filmmakers, artists, and many other positions. So we've got these three, and within these pathways, I think it's important to highlight that although each role is going to have a unique set of skills, like financial roles, for example, are going to focus on quantitative experiences, um, there are also some overarching skills, on which I will come back in a minute. So if I give you a few more examples of what are roles in sustainability, maybe that will make it a bit clearer and give you a better idea of what are the potential jobs. So we can think of sustainable practitioners. So sustainable practitioners can work in very different sectors, from building companies, hospitality. We have students in the fashion industry, but also conservation and wildlife protection. Um, and what's interesting is that the variety of jobs where sustainability skills are required is really expanding. So I can also think about corporate social responsibility officers. We can think about sustainability managers. So this would usually require like a bachelor degree, and it's about helping organizations to improve their environmental profile while maintaining their competitiveness and profitability. If we go into the hard environmental data, we can think of environmental analysts. So usually these professionals in sustainability will gather and analyze data about environmental factors like air, water, soil, and they can work with private companies, but also in the public sector, where they can really help to shape public policy when it comes to sustainability. And just to give you another couple of examples, I was recently reading about job opportunities in the UK, and I noticed that more and more supermarkets are looking into sustainability. And I recently saw a job advertised as a sustainability assistant in deforestation. But also another opportunity to work for a charity like Cancer Research UK, who was looking for a sustainability lead. And the idea behind that position was to develop, implement, and report on the Cancer Research UK's sustainability strategy. So you see from my selection of examples how wide it is. But I would say that there is a common point between those organizations and companies and charities and those roles you can do. It's the fact that they are more and more conscious of the need to act responsibly and to set really high standards in terms of sustainability. So I think people who trained in sustainability tends to become champions also of sustainability. I think, Paul, maybe you will agree with me on that. Most of our students are really kind of passionate about it and really want to champion sustainability wherever they might be working. So we looked at like the different jobs. Let me just touch briefly on some of the skills that we find in most of the sustainability positions. So there are overarching skills like analytical skills. So that's about collecting, analyzing, or presenting information. People who work in sustainability are always or very often very good at problem solving skills, and especially when it comes to creatively tackling a problem. And of course, communication and interpersonal skills, which means bringing teams together and communicate about kind of common goals around sustainability. And that's very important because I think we can agree that sustainability roles are about getting people on board and caring. I think the ethic of care is really important about the issues and sustainability issues, and act on it in their day-to-day job, but also as citizens in their daily lives. So yeah, finally, maybe just a few words on the sustainability job market. So I think we can agree that there's been a shift from being like sustainability generalist to more emphasis on sustainability specialist. So we can see that the sustainability field is really evolving and is more looking at business strategy, change management, but also ground execution. I think that's where our MSc Sustainability in Practice at MLA College really answers those questions, with students doing field project directly on the ground related to sustainability. So this is just an overview. We can go into much more details around that. But I think the main thing to consider is that when it comes to sustainability, there isn't only one pathway or one door, and many different roles can really open many different avenues. I mean, if you take the NHS, for example, our healthcare system in the UK, there is a growing awareness and consideration for sustainability, and not just in terms of waste, like medical waste, but also about how do we manage water, transportation. And on the other hand, end of the scope, you can think of national parks, for example, where there are typically a lot of jobs there relating to sustainability in terms of enhancing landscape and protecting landscape for people and for nature. So I guess now that I've broken that down, it comes down to the context of the job. And maybe, Paul, you can say a bit more around that. Oh, I think you're on mute.
Sorry, that's a fine for me. I think it's important before we think about the context of a job to just discuss a little bit about education and education for sustainable development. I think it's important to understand that education, as far as I'm concerned, is not just a means to an end. In other words, you don't just go through your educational life in order to get a specific job at the end of it. An educational life is quite long, and the labour market changes very quickly. So, in some senses, that kind of connectivity through your education is a little bit of a fool's errand sometimes. Education, I think, as far as I'm concerned, has always been an end in itself. Now, I appreciate that might sound like a slightly entitled view coming from somebody who has done pretty well educationally, and I come from a country where even if I'd struggled at education, there was a sense of support for people who might struggle, and there was also a healthy employment rate. So, how important was it? And I also recognise that there are people for whom education is a very real pathway to a different type of life to the one they have or have had as children or young people. I'm not really sure I mean that. I think I mean more about the focus that I dislike in terms of a kind of government narrative sometimes, where they sort of put the stress on higher education as being the so-called route to a specific career. I mean, I think that's quite interesting in itself, that that's a narrative that we push on certain universities and not always others. And so therefore there is a bit of a differential between the types of young people who go and come out of these institutions. However, I think kind of morally, if you like, my kind of core belief is that education is in itself a really valuable thing. And the reason is that it doesn't just teach you about a certain subject. It teaches you ways to think differently, to view the world in different ways. It teaches you about dealing with other people, some of them you may not wish to deal with or don't particularly like. It puts you in situations where you have to become resilient. And it puts you into situations where you need to be able to think clearly, communicate clearly, and where you don't always succeed. And you need to be able to come back from those failures and try again. I suppose the reason I say that is because sustainability, as we've already established, doesn't have this completely clear employment route that connects a degree to a specific job. I think we're more. I think we're more in the realm. Sorry. Okay. I think we're more in the realms of what happens when you read English or history at university. There aren't really professions that align with those kinds of degrees, particularly. But nobody would argue that they're useless or not important qualifications to have. In sustainability, not only do we talk about the context of sustainability itself, the concepts and the ideas that underpin sustainability thinking, we do talk about specific roles and techniques within the job. Now, sometimes, again, I think, oh, that's all a bit basic. Everybody must know what sustainability is by now. But actually, as I say, I think you do realise when you talk to both students and to businesses that people are confused and they're looking for others to help them out. And it's our job as educators to provide people who are flexible and adaptable to a wide range of contexts. But because people ask, I do think it's important that we do try and identify some things that I think are tangible to talk about. And that's led a number of people to talk around the sorts of things they would expect for an education or from an education for sustainable development. And I think that's the first thing I would point out is about education for sustainable development, not education about sustainable development. So I think that really indicates to you that this is an education that you use rather than just things that you passively know about.
Again, I completely agree with you, Paul, on that. I think it's really important to think about education for to allow us to understand why sustainability education is important. Um, I think that sustainability is really key to solve the challenges that we are facing. I mean, in times of climate change, environmental pollution, loss of biodiversity, there isn't any way around learning more about sustainability. The more you know, almost the better for the planet, but also for you. And the more positive is your impact on human environment interactions. So, in other words, I think sustainability education, as you say, is really important to improve how we think, how we understand information as well, how we build social skills like empathy, but also emotional intelligence, and how we encourage positive actions and behavior with each other. So I guess, Paul, that leads me to my other question as well. It's like, so what do you think? What do we get from a sustainability degree?
Okay, so having said that it's a very kind of broad subject and it could kind of mean anything to anybody, we have had a go at trying to understand what some of the key terms and key ideas are. And I think those are best summed up in UNESCO's sustainability competencies. So UNESCO is a UN agency that looks after, amongst other things, education. And they've suggested that sustainable development education requires us to ground students in a set of competencies that are really important to build on as you become a sustainability professional in whatever way that might manifest itself. So these competencies include things like systems thinking, for example, and that's the ability to analyze problems over a broad canvas and to understand the interconnectedness of the natural world with the social world with the economic world, and the impacts our economic practices have upon the integrity of natural resources and what we call ecosystem services. So that's understanding things like something about cause and effect relationships, about feedback relationships, about trying to understand unintended consequences and the like. UNESCO also talk about having anticipatory competence, and that's about being able to understand those connections and use them in a way that helps us foresee and forecast scenarios, thinking about the implications of the actions we take now rather than discovering way down the line that we've probably done something a bit wrong. I think we can think of quite a few examples of where people in all good faith and with imperfect knowledge have made changes, have taken action, and with hindsight, we look at it and think, well, what a stupid idea that was. We should have done something very different. And I suppose what UNESCO is saying is that perhaps people who are trained in sustainability might be able to help people avoid those traps, warn people of the problems that might be down the line to some extent. Mary, as you've pointed out, I also think sustainability education is also about people. And sometimes that shocks people because I think they just think of it very much in terms of the environment. But I think we need to better understand why people do what they do, what values they have, and how those values underpin their practices and their behaviours. In other words, we need to have something called normative competency. And that's not to denigrate or even enforce change and value sets on people. It's about understanding them and working with them in order to embed change in a way that works for them. So that might involve issues of evaluating and negotiating values and principles. Clearly, when we're dealing with global issues, that's a really serious part of our practice. Understanding that not everybody thinks like us or acts like us, and probably never will, is something that's a really important skill set in trying to negotiate some of the pathways by which we have to set clear principles that allow others to express their own values and in their own way, and yet work towards a sustainable future. We also need to be strategically competent, and that's about designing and implementing innovative solutions and actions that promote sustainability at a wide range of levels. So perhaps that's about being slightly entrepreneurial about things, identifying opportunities, setting goals, taking steps, leading people in particular, managing them, if you can call it what you will, but measuring and making change and taking a role, an active role in all of that. And of course, part of that is about how we work with others. So how we accept them and how we accept ourselves and how we trade all of those personal beliefs off against working on projects at different scales in different locations with different stakeholder groups. I suppose we might call that collaboration competency, being able to talk to people, listen to people, most importantly perhaps, negotiate, collaborate, bring in diverse sets of people and ideas and recognise areas that we have in common rather than those areas that essentially tend to keep us apart. Because clearly sustainable development is a challenge, and it's going to be a challenge going forward. And if we wish to pursue it, we're going to have to do that, I think, collectively. So it does involve thinking about conflict resolution. It does mean about facilitating some form of wider stakeholder involvement in problems and democratising decision making. The sixth competency, and I promise there won't be many more, that UNESCO talk about is critical thinking. And now critical thinking is something that we use a lot in educational terms. And students often ask us what we mean by that. And sometimes we get a bit stumped trying to explain it to people. But I suspect that in most sustainability courses, you're going to find that you're going to have to exercise a capacity of decision making and questioning, to question norms and practices and opinions, to reflect on your own values, your own positions on things, and engage in a much more analytical way to understand the challenges that are in front of you and what influences you can bring to bear on those problems. So that might bring us to a position that you might call, rather vaguely, being self-aware. I think that is about the ability to reflect upon your own role, your own actions and your own motivations and your own feelings towards something. And I think that's really important, because if you do that in the process of your learning, you kind of understand how you're responding almost in real time to what's in front of you. Understanding that no one is perfect, everybody makes mistakes, nobody has perfect sight of all the problems. Everybody's got behaviours that are perhaps not as sustainable as they should be or wish to be, and that also many of those problems are manifesting ourselves, I think is a really important thing to learn. All of that might help you understand that people respond to problems and actions in their own and very emotional sense. Putting that all together, then, UNESCO define their final competency as an integrated problem solving. This isn't going to be an education wherever you go. I don't think it's going to be an education where you learn just lots of facts and at the end of it you regurgitate them and you dump them on a piece of paper and get marked accordingly. It's going to be an education where you're going to have to understand some key principles and practices and something about a set of contexts at a range of scales. But in the end, I think if you're going to expect that it's sufficient to just memory them, then you're probably not likely to succeed. I think you need to think again. Sustainability education is going to ask you to apply material that you've learned to new problems or to old problems that are yet to be solved. And so if you're thinking this sort of education is just going to be about learning a few interesting facts about different parts of the world and what people do, or that you just think it's focused on the environment and not on the business world or the social world either, then it's probably not for you. But if you want to use sustainability, I think, as a way of really fully engaging with the reasons why things are like they are and how they might be made different in a way that benefits both our societies and our natural world, then I think it's something that's worth considering to taking up as a subject. But I understand that that can probably prompt the question, that all sounds great, but what does it really look like when you are in a sustainability course? Mary, could you just kind of outline what, broadly speaking, what an sustainability course might include?
Sure. I think it's a valid point, and I really like the fact that you use the UNESCO competencies, because that allows us to dive deeper into how our students learn and what they learn. And also, I'd like to bring into the balance the 5 Ps suggested by the United Nations, which I think are a good entry. So students in sustainability will learn about those 5 Ps. So that means the interactions between people, planet, prosperity, peace, and partnerships. And as you can see from these, you will learn about a wide range of topics to give you a holistic perspective. And I really insist on that, because I think sustainability is about that. It's about considering all the different aspects to support implementing all the skills that Paul just referred into the practice. So it's a bit having that global vision, but also local vision of what's going on from a holistic perspective. So I think also there are different levels of learning, and the more you progress in your studies, the more you will become familiar with specific topics, and the more you will progress in critical thinking as well, which is kind of one of the most difficult ones probably. But for instance, so that scale of learning is important when it comes to sustainability, because sustainability is conceived and practiced differently around the globe. I mean, cultural contexts are really important to take into consideration when it comes to sustainability. So I guess what you will learn on a sustainability course is about how to navigate these different scales from the local to the global. So it's almost that sustainability starts really on your doorstep up to the global level, where you can learn, for example, so we use the 5 Ps, but we also use the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. Now, I'm really keen with this because, for example, if you look at SDG 14 or 15, which are about life below water and life on land, that will give you an insight of understanding the natural world and how it is being impacted, influenced, and also how it evolves alongside human societies. And on the other hand, if you look at SDG 8 or SDG 9, you will then delve deeper into economics, businesses, and sustainability. So I think alongside the skills you've mentioned, Paul, I think the SDGs and the 5 Ps about interactions is really crucial and is a really key element of what you will learn. I would say then, so firstly, there was the importance of the scale at which you're going to learn and the different scales. But I think another aspect is the fact that sustainability is about connections, and you will learn very much about connections between key areas of the environment, economies, and societies to understand how they entangle together and interact together. And I think you mentioned that briefly, Paul, but sustainability is also very much about learning to move with times, adapt to changes, and be innovative. So I think sustainability courses can really give you the skills to become social and environmental conscious of wherever you're working. So social environmental conscious of your organization, your charity, your business, or even your sector. And to do that, you'll be exploring global challenges like food security, environmental justice, water supply or lack of, sustainable energy, and so many other subjects. So students are really learning to bring individuals, communities, and institutions together to almost kind of hold creative spaces of sustainable development. I think creativity in sustainability is really important to build resilient societies. So there's the notion of scale, notion of connection, notion of adaptability, but also the values are really important. And I think that's what makes sustainability courses singular in the sense that A lot of the values are really associated with sustainability, is about being ethical, and I will come back to that at the end of the webinar probably. But learning about sustainability is really transformative. And something that strikes me in terms of the common points between all our students is the fact that they all want to be change maker, and they all really believe in the power of like interdisciplinary approaches to solve challenges. So they are not at all narrow-minded. They are open, they are curious, they are approaching problematic with empathy. And they are really also passionate and compassionate to bring changes at their scale while understanding what's going on at all the different scales. So I would say that what you will learn in a sustainability course is really to promote solution-based kind of learning experiences and cultivate skills and knowledge that can help you to build more just and sustainable society. After all, it takes all of us to be sustainable. So although I agree with you, Paul, we may be talking to people who might not necessarily agree with sustainability. So that can come with some challenges. But I definitely think that it takes all of us, and we can all make a positive change at our own scale. And also, sustainability courses will teach you how to promote social equity and cohesion and inclusion between different communities and societies. So yeah, I think there's definitely a lot of kind of value in understanding and learning about sustainability.
I have one question for Paul and Marie. What are the sustainability trends or developments you're excited about?
Paul, would you like to start? I think you're on mute.
Yeah. Well, I think as permit me to be a bit of an environmental science nerd here. I think there are real developments in the way we measure and monitor the environment. There are a number of technological developments that are about better sampling, better analysis, and that's all adding up to a much more nuanced understanding of the natural world from very small to global scales. And I think that's getting better and better year on year. And thus our understanding of the supportive services that are provided by nature and our impacts upon them are also getting better. And I think allied to that is that there are some really great moves to democratize and open up data to allow communities to access information so that they can engage more fully in decision-making processes. They can discover a lot better, I suppose, about how the world around them works and how it's managed. And I think that even extends to things like citizen science projects, which have helped us achieve data sets that without community help, we probably wouldn't be able to achieve, because the time and the resources that are needed for that are just too much. So I think that's really interesting and exciting. And I think finally, although I would think, I do think that some of these approaches need more work, and they certainly require a degree of scrutiny. I do detect that there is a greater emphasis on nature forward approaches from many businesses. We can be cynical and we can pick them apart for not being perfect. And I do think we have to be cautious about what people call greenwashing. However, I think having nature on the agenda in boardrooms and in executive groups across the world is by and large a good thing. I think there's still plenty of work to do, but starting to persuade businesses that what's good for nature is good for business and good for their people is a trend that I really do hope continues. Mary, what about you?
Yeah, again, I agree with you. And I think in terms of sustainability, I think more and more sustainability is going to be associated with transparency, authenticity, and accountability. And I think you mentioned greenwashing. For me, that's going to be one of the best solutions. Also, the fact that people are becoming more and more vigilant about it, and also holding businesses and institutions and governments accountable about sustainability challenges. That's going to make a real difference in the years to come. And sustainability is becoming more and more a long-term driver for businesses and societies, but also for individuals. And I think strong sustainability strategies are also really supporting innovation and creativity at all levels. I mean, it's fantastic when you see the amount of variety of projects linked to sustainability that are coming out from citizens' initiatives, but also government initiatives. I mean, it's fantastic. We're also, I know there is a really, really strong awareness and conscious about what are the global challenges, but I feel there is also a sense of positivity and the fact that people want to make changes and really try and act on that. So if I finish with a few thoughts on trends in terms of sustainability education, I think the fact that we are more and more conscious that there is a shift needed in the way that we think about our relationship with each other as human beings, but also with non-humans, so animals, but also the planet as a whole, is very much happening. I think more and more people are placing values like empathy, openness, curiosity, and connections at the heart of their sustainable practices. And that's definitely something sustainability students share in common, all those different kind of qualities of approaching the world. And I think you mentioned self-awareness, Paul, and I completely agree with you. I think people interested in sustainability and sustainability students really are trying to develop their critical discourses, their self-awareness, and change their perspectives on themselves, others, and the wider natural world. And I think this will all contribute in the future, and it's still doing that. It is still doing that to build more sustainable and resilient societies.
Thank you so much for your time, Paul and Marie. It was fantastic hearing your thoughts on sustainability education. I will stop sharing my screen now to see if we have any questions from attendees, and I will read them out. What are some of the common barriers that individuals face when trying to transition to a sustainability-focused role, and how can education help overcome these?
Wow,
Yeah,
that's a big question
that's a good
straight
one
up.
to start with.
Um, okay, so if I draw on a few examples I can think of from students that I've taught, sometimes it is that their employer is looking for a very specific set of skills, and as we've already maintained, that isn't that's usually around that specific set of skills is usually around the context of the job itself. And it's impossible to train people for very specific roles in very specific places, because once you've done that for one person, then you have to do it for everybody, and that becomes an impossible task. What we try and do, I think, is, I mean, we have an added issue, is that we both live in the UK. So teaching a UK perspective on sustainability is also pointless when most of our students are non-UK resident and are not going to work in the UK. So we've developed courses that very much ask them to think about and reflect upon sustainability issues within their own setting and their own location and maybe their own organisation. So I think again, what education does is it provides the tools and the general wraparound that allows students to understand their context more keenly and think out of the problems that they face. However, until businesses kind of tweak, sort of tweak that's an important part of their skill set, and they're still saying, yeah, but you can't do X, Y, and Z like you might expect an apprentice to do in a very work-based setting, then it is going to be a bit of a barrier. So our work is almost less with students and perhaps more with businesses to persuade them that sustainability students are a good set of people to have on their books, and that the businesses perhaps have to spend some time developing those students into that very specific context.
Thank you, Paul. We have another interesting one from Miles Lewis. For sustainability professionals already active in the field, what advantages or career advancement could come from pursuing further education, such as a master's by research in sustainability?
Do you want to talk about that, or?
Yes, yeah, no, absolutely. Maybe we can both talk about it. I think there is absolutely value for professionals to undertake either access course, bachelor's degrees or master's degrees, because as we mentioned with Paul, there is definitely like a scaffolding of the learning. So we will empower you with like the critical thinking skills and the team building skills that you will gain from those different degrees. And I think the higher you progress, the more complex and the more talented you become in understanding this bigger picture and also working with others. So I definitely see values for, I don't know, like sustainable practitioners to want to do an MSc sustainability in practice because they may want to take a specific project further and do research and understand how they can progress on that and work with other people. So, and on the other side as well, there might be some people who have a lot of ground experience but not necessarily have the qualifications and want to have also some of the legitimacy that sometimes degrees give you. And that confidence as well of like, yeah, I've achieved an access course, I've achieved a bachelor degree, an MSc. It's also like a personal kind of, not, how do you say that in English? A proud element that you can align your professional skills with also like academic skills. And I think it's also about being curious. So a lot of professionals may want to undertake a degree because they are curious about learning more and widening their perspectives on sustainability and opening new doors. So
Yeah,
that,
I would agree with that. I mean, I think bringing us back to the MSc Sustainability in Practice, I think is a really good idea. That's designed as a participatory research program, so it's very different to kind of doing an ordinary research thesis. It requires the practitioner to be front and center of the process. So they are leading and managing that process. So really, they're doing it within the context of work. And so we've had, for example, I've had a really recent a graduate who worked in health and safety, but the health and safety of the workforce is kind of part of that one of those sustainable development goal indicators. And so what he did was he improved the approaches to health and safety in his workplace. And it isn't just one where you kind of go and get your minions to do it. You are leading that team, and you are reflecting upon your practice, and you are looking to monitor and measure the improvements, and you're doing it a couple of times. So you're constantly reflecting upon your own practice and your ability to lead people through that change. So I would say that if you are a sustainability practitioner on the ground and you have plenty of authority and experience, but you want to take a qualification to either to improve your skills or, as Mary said, to gain a degree of accreditation for those skills that you have, then the MSc Sustainability in Practice is an excellent vehicle for that. And we sometimes do have a bit of an issue trying to explain that to people, that it isn't going to be a lot of library work and a lot of data collection. It is going to be about focusing on sustainability practice on the ground. But that's where I think people who are already doing that in their day-to-day jobs can perhaps add to the debate.
can I just add on that, Paul, as well, if that's okay? I think, so we've got the MSc, but we also have the access course, which is like your 8-week course. And I think this one is much more designed for people who have an interest in sustainability, but not necessarily at the level of the MSc or the bachelor. And I think this access course is a really great entry and introduction to the field of sustainability. So especially for professionals who have an interest in that. So yeah, a really great question. Thank you.
Thank you both. We have another question from Vanessa. How are the competencies and skills in the sustainability programs assessed, and do you find employers value these assessments?
Okay, so that's quite a technical question. So they are not directly assessed. What they are is they are built in within the course. And again, we design our courses. We have I would say, a fairly stringent framework of how we design courses in the UK. So that's partly about a context that is given to us by basically by UK higher education. And so what happens is that we map the competencies onto the way the course functions, both in terms of content and in terms of formative and summative assessment. So you won't get a direct assessment of your strategic competence, for example, but you might have, in the context of a module, an assessment that asks you to think about what might happen in 10 years' time if you take certain actions. It is sometimes again it's sometimes difficult to pull those things out as being overt and obvious, but they're definitely embedded within the curriculum.
Thank you both, very helpful. I have another question from Palasha. What regulatory changes do organizations face when implementing sustainable practices, in your opinion?
Depends where you are, I would say. Depends on the industry you're in, depends on the country you're in. So you may find the regulatory landscape is quite top down. So it will probably depend upon government policy. It will probably depend upon maybe whether you're a certain trading body, whether you have certain accreditations, whether you have to do certain things in certain ways. That's quite a difficult question to answer very specifically, I think.
Thanks, Paul. I have another one from Tariq. How can sustainability education be made more accessible to individuals from diverse backgrounds who may not traditionally have access to these programs?
That's really interesting. Yes, absolutely. That's where we talk about social and environmental justice and the fact that I think sustainability education can be accessible to everyone. If we go back to those core values I was mentioning during the webinar about that ethic of care. So if you have an interest about the planet, or if you have an interest about socio-environmental interactions, I think there are ways to make it really inclusive. So if you are in the countryside or if you are in the cities, you can all make positive changes. I mean, when you look at projects about nature biodiversity or biodiversity project in cities, in the middle of cities, or how also some projects are kind of emerging around food security and linking food security with access to natural areas, or also mobility. I think there's a lot of really interesting initiatives to make it more inclusive for all. So I think it takes citizens' actions, confidence, but also institutions and governments to also promote that. So yeah, inclusion should be acted upon at the different scales and different levels. I go back to my notion of scale, which I really like. Paul?
I also think in terms of accessibility, in terms of the practicality of accessibility, the way we deliver our courses is through a medium which we call the total learning package, which is not like many students perhaps will have experienced something called a virtual learning environment, which is usually something that lives either on the cloud or on a server somewhere, and they can kind of dip in and they would stream videos and what have you. We appreciate that not everybody has access to the internet, kind of full broadband all the time. And this comes actually out of our organisation's history, which is supplying courses for people who work in offshore contexts. And so effectively you get your materials right at the start. That will have all your videos and support materials in there. And it means that whatever precious internet time you're going to use, you'll use talking to us as your tutors, looking at the library materials, and getting and preparing your work. So hopefully it means that we are available to people who don't have sort of 24 hours always on internet. And secondly, in the few places we do use specialist software, we've made sure that software is freely available. So students don't have to pay to access other bits of technology. Effectively, you do need a laptop or a computer of your own to download that material to. But outside of that, we hope that the material is as accessible to everybody as we can. We have videos of lectures, but we also have full transcripts. We have lots of formative exercises where you can submit work to practice if you're not too confident of your academic skills. And so you can always talk to a tutor about improving things ahead of that big deadline that you'll have at the end of term. That's not to say that you can just kind of come out of school and go straight into our MSc. There clearly are application criteria, but as Mary's already suggested, for people who perhaps haven't quite reached BSc standard yet, or that what we would think of in the UK as the second year of a BSc, then we have an access course that allows you to partly bridge the gap and practice, but it also gives everybody an idea of what it is they're going to experience, and we can make the sort of ultimate judgment as to whether you are ready to succeed on the BSc. So, all of that is taken care of in the application process when you talk to our applications team, but also when we vet your applications, when we read them when they come to us.
Can I just add on that, Paul, in terms of the practicalities? I think also in terms of the inclusion, you and I are quite representative. I mean, I'm not an native English speaker. I come from France, so I think most of our students are also international students. So in terms of like the diversity, we really celebrate that in terms of inclusion, gender. And what we try also to do is that in our module, so for example, cultural sustainability, we have a South African poet who came to kind of deliver some of the content. So we really try to bring a wide range of different voices to reflect the beauty and the diversity of different cultural backgrounds. So that's definitely one of the strengths at MLA, I think, that inclusion and the fact that you don't have to necessarily be a UK native speaker to be able to do the courses. So yeah.
Thank you both. I'm aware of the time. I don't think we have time for any more questions. So we'll wrap up the webinar now. I'd just like to thank all attendees for their valuable time today. And just to let you know of the various learning opportunities available in sustainability at MLA College. If you are interested to join one of our programs, please get in touch with us at info@mla.ac.uk or visit our website at mla.ac.uk. Thank you all. Thank you all for your time. Thanks, Paul and Marie. Thank you everyone for attending. Have a nice day. Goodbye.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.